Yo, what's up gamers? It's your boy GoldDemon 12 back with another Honkai Star video where I get to yap about Acheron. You love to see it. Now, today's video is going to be a new one for me. We're going to be doing a bit of a pre-release analysis, a little bit of a classroom activity, as many YouTubers like to call it. And so, yeah, I just wanted to talk about Acheron, explain her mechanics and everything, because Hoyoverse has officially announced it, and there could be a lot of confusion for some players because if you've been around the community for long enough, you know Hoyoverse is a really big, wording issue in terms of there's, descriptions for things, and there's been a lot of errors in descriptions just straight up for some of the stuff. So I'm here to clarify that and hopefully explain the mechanics to you so that you understand this character better for when you do get her. Or if you don't get her, you understand what she does, right? And maybe why she's overpowered as fuck. But you see, I'm gonna say that, and I'm gonna get some dude in the comment section that's just gonna go off on me for that. It's like, like, okay, dude, okay, dude. But yeah, so I'm gonna hopefully explain it to you. This is not live. This is a recorded video. So if you do have any questions, ask them down below. If you want me to talk about it on the live, just check me out on Twitch. It's right there on screen. It'll be in the description as well. That being said, onto the character overview. So, and by the way, this is from Hoyoverse, right, on Hoyo Lab. And this is the way they describe the character. Acheron is a DPS character who accumulates charges by inflicting debuffs on enemies to unleash her ultimate. With her ultimate, Acheron ignores enemy weakness types, drains all enemies' toughness, and reduces their type res. Acheron's technique can also instantly eliminate some enemy targets during exploration. That is a very, very key thing about her technique that we'll get into later, when I go over it, but it is very good. Very good. And her technique alone is a reason to summon this character, to be honest with you. So to start, we have the traces. So she's got quite a bit of, words on her traces, but there's a good reason, right? It's pretty complex on the nuance with the, her kit, right? So her first trace, Red Oni. When battle starts, immediately gains a certain number of slash stream and applies a certain number of Crimson Knot stacks to a random enemy. Crimson Knot, just so you know, is her mechanic for her and how she targets her ultimate, right? It all ties into her ult. And again, I'll explain further. When slash stream reaches its upper limit, for every point of slash stream that exceeds the limit, gains one stack of quadrivalent ascendants up to a max number of ascendant stacks. I'm not going to say the first one. It's it's a tough word, tough word. Uh, I don't even think I said it right, but basically what this is saying here is you start the battle with a certain number of ult stacks, right? If you remember from the live stream. Actually, let me pull that up. All right, so I'm moving my camera just so you guys can see this. But you see right here her ultimate stacks. Whenever Pella applies a debuff with this attack, right, you'll see it go up by 1. She didn't apply there because clearly it's not an E4 Pella, but using her skill or applying a debuff will give you a stack, right? And it applies Crimson Knot. Now, there is one thing to note about Crimson Knot, in case you guys don't know, is it doesn't actually count as a debuff. And there's a couple of key indicators for that. One reason we know this is whenever it is applied right here by Silverwolf, you can see there's the debuff icon, the red arrow down for speed, and then there's the Crimson Knot debuff, right? But it's not actually a debuff. So that's one thing that's important to know. Crimson Knot itself doesn't count as a debuff, so it won't trigger any debuff related things. It is purely a targeting mechanic for her ultimate, right? And you can see down there applying Silverwolf's, slow, debuff gave her a stack for her ultimate, right? In the whole ascendance stacks thing is an overcap. So right here it's 9 like petals, right? Essentially because it's a flower, right? It's 9 petals. You can go up to 12 petals, right? That's how it caps out. So you can stack up to 12 out of 9. The ultimate will only ever use 9, right? When you use the ultimate, after the ultimate is used, you then gain those 3 stacks, starting the new rotation, right? So it allows you to overcap the ult a little bit so that you have more comfortable rotations. And then when you use it, right, it gives you those stacks and applies the Crimson Knot like targeting thing to a specific enemy, right? So hopefully that clears some things up in case you were a little bit confused on what ascendant stacks are and like what this trace does, because this trace will have you start out with a certain amount of energy in the fight and give you or not and give you, sorry, but if you were to apply more debuffs, allow you to overcap up to a limit of 3 on her, right? So hopefully that clarifies things for that specific trace. Her next one, Abyss. The Abyss trace, what this does is whenever there is 1 to 2 Nihility characters, or 1 or 2 Nihility characters other than Acheron, so not including herself, the damage dealt by Acheron's basic skill and ultimate will increase by a certain amount. So this one is very interesting to explain, and actually let me pull up something for you guys. My bad, I should have pulled this up earlier. This is the second time I'm recording this video. I had it better planned out earlier, I'm not gonna lie. But this is the important thing about his trace. So if you've ever played Genshin Impact, there's a certain character called Nuevalet, I believe that's how you say his name, who has a trace just like this. And so what this does is this gives Acheron a unique multiplier to her damage, right? So you have your regular damage stats, but then Acheron has a separate unique one that is a multiplier on top of everything else, or to the multiplier like this, the scalar directly. And so what do I mean by that? Well, it's right here. So how damage works in this game, and it's very similar in Genshin, the formulas are pretty much the same. You've got the base damage, which is going to be the stat multiplier, right? Like 200% attack times, the attack amount. So that attack's going to do like 4k damage, right? That's how you get the base damage of the attack. And then you times that by the crit multiplier. Now, obviously, you either crit or you don't crit, right? But if you were to crit, you times it by the crit multiplier, and then you multiply that by the damage boost multiplier times the weaken multiplier. Now, weaken isn't really relevant. There's like only 2 characters that actually apply weaken, but typically it's these 3 multipliers together, right, to get your damage numbers. And actually, let me show another example. Okay, just to clarify even further, I'm going to show you with one of my own sheets, right? So what we have here is it takes the damage stat, right? So the 300% is the multiplier times the attack stat, right? In this case, it's like 4.5k, right? Times the crit, and then times the damage percent. And then you have to multiply it by the other stats, which is going to be the enemy's defense multiplier, which changes based on level, right? The resistance multiplier, which typically it's like 40 to 20. Some enemies have it more or less, but that's typically what it is for anything that's not weak to that type. If it's weak to that type, it's 0, right? The vulnerability multiplier, which is like a just static multiplier that stays the same unless there's a character like Wenifin or Welt who have a vulnerability debuff on them, that they would multiplicatively increase the damage, right? The damage mitigation multiplier, which is another thing like that, right? It's just normally a static one that doesn't really do anything. And then there's the broken multiplier, which is typically 90%. So whenever you attack something that's not weakness broken, you do 10% less damage. But when they are broken, it goes up to 100, and they take, the regular amount of damage, right? Just to give you an example here it is, right? This is how you see it out. A level 80 enemy is going to have a 1k defense, which is about 50% of a defense multiplier. So your damage is cut in half just by that, right? The res multiplier stays at 100 for if they are weak to that type, right? The reason why that is because, well, that's 0 resistance, right? If you were to, I don't know, have 40 resistance, it would be obviously 60%, right? You'd have 40% damage reduction to that type, right? Damage taken multiplier is, of course, 0, but like when I finish the example, right, it goes up, right? And here's the universal multiplier. This is the weakness broken thing, right? And this formula right here is just sort of calculating what percent of damage you would be doing to that target, right? So that's basically how damage works. The reason why me explaining all this is important is because Acheron's is a separate multiplier within this calculation. So you can either times it by the base value, like the base scalar, or you can put it at the very end. The numbers will end up the same. But the reason why that's important is because that comes in here and then just adds another multiplicative value on top so that you do even more damage, right? So for example, you see this is currently 65k with this problem. Well, if I were to add in Acheron's number, right, which is, where again, this is actually what it is, but don't ask me how I know this, all right? It broke because I'm stupid. My bad, I forgot to multiply it. It just massively increases the damage. See how that went up by like 40k? So this is how important her trace is, right? Her trace is massively important to her overall damage just because it is a unique multiplier, right? So maximizing this by running her with multiple Nihility units is what you're going to want to do just because of how impactful her trace is to her overall kit, right? And some people will complain about this, but this isn't really an issue. And plus, Pella's on her banner anyways, right? And Pella's one of the best forces in the game. You should have her leveled regardless, right? And so that it's in itself isn't really an issue. The issue lies in the light cone options, which I will explain later. But again, very powerful trace. You're gonna have to play into this when using Acheron, right? And then her next trace, Thunder Core. When using Rainblade from Acheron's ultimate, when Rainblade from Acheron's ultimate hits enemy targets with Crimson Knot, it increases her damage and stacking it a number of times, right? It'll stack multiple times because she has 3 Rain Blades, right? You stack it 3 times, right? Very simple. When Stygian Resurge triggers, additional damage deals damage a certain number of times. Jesus Christ. Sorry, the wording is not the way I'd word it. Anyways, each time lightning damage equal is viewed as part of the damage. Blah blah blah. Whatever. It says each time deals lightning damage equal and is viewed as part of the ultimate damage. You see why I have a problem reading this? That's actually how it's worded. All right. Apologies for messing up, but that's actually how it's worded. All this is saying is that when you attack with their ultimate, damage go up. Very simple. When ultimate is done, it does the final slash. You do additional proxy damage. That's what this says. Very, very good, right? You just do more damage. That's all this trace is. Moving on to the next thing. And by the way, all this is very good, very powerful, and it's what you want in a character kit, right? Something to boost up their potential, right? This, again, is great. It's just, gaining stacks. This one is her damage thing that most characters have, and this one, more damage, right? So what more could you want? So the next important thing on here is her technique. Now, this technique is arguably one of the strongest techniques in the whole game, and it might just be straight up the strongest technique in the whole game, and, well, I'll explain why. So it immediately attacks the enemy, just like a normal technique, and you gain ascendance at the start of every wave, deals lightning damage to all enemies, and reduces toughness of all enemies irrespective of weakness types. So the best way I can explain this is that this is just a power creeped version of Silverwolf's technique. You know how Silverwolf's technique will, do all type break, right? This is just a better version of that because you gain a stack, so you gain an overflow stack, right, for Acheron by using the technique. It deals damage to everybody, and it will break all types. And it does this every wave. So like Pure Fiction, you know how there's like 4 waves? You get 4 procs, right? In MOC, there's 2 waves, so you'll get 2 procs of this. But again, this is doing a chunk of damage every single wave. So it's just like a direct upgrade to Silverwolf's technique, and it's a very powerful technique in and of itself, right? Insane. So, guess what? We're not done with the technique. Enemies with this weakness broken will always trigger the lightning weakness break effect, right? Obviously, right? And then this is where it explains the ascendant stacks, right? So whenever she gains 1 point of slash stream after she uses her ultimate, she applies 1 Crimson Knot to a random enemy, right? So you use the ultimate, you get the stacks back, it applies the ult targeting Crimson Knot things onto the enemy, right? And then here's the latter part of it. Attacking normal enemies will instantly defeat them without needing to enter battle. Enemies who aren't hit won't consume technique points. So this means if you're over in the overworld, right, and you're just pressing the button, right, you can just keep spamming it all you want. As long as it doesn't hit an enemy, you're good to go, right? And by normal enemies, it just means non-elites, right? And this works everywhere in the game. So you can use it Simulated Universe, Golden Gears, right? It will, in fact, it's going to be the best technique for those modes because you just skip the regular enemies. So you can save your 99% health damage things for an actual elite fight or like a boss and just like one-shot them. So this is like the best character in the whole game for every single like event mode, which is kind of crazy. And this is referring to the Simulated Universe modes, right? But she's just stupid broken because, again, you can just skip all the fights and get all the rewards. It works everywhere. So it's going to be a very powerful technique just in general. And, given the specification that's non-elite enemies, right? But that's not even a big deal, right? Because, well, every MOC stage and every Pure Fiction, it's going to spawn with an elite, so you can't just, like, one-shot it, right? But yeah, that's still a very powerful technique. It's going to speed up farming for a lot of players, and this technique alone is a reason to get this character, to be honest with you. It's going to help a lot of players with just general play. And overall, this technique is stupid powerful. Arguably, like, the best technique in the game, up there with Ron Mays, with her auto cast skill and what it does. And simulated universe. And in fact, you can combine the two. Have her be the attacker with Rune May's skill proc, you slash, boom, they're instantly dead phase 1. It's going to be stupid broken, right? But yeah, very, very insane technique. So let's move on to the next thing, because this video is already getting long enough and this character is very complex. So we have her basic attack. This does not do anything. It's basic attack. Then we have her talent. Oh boy. So when slash stream reaches upper limit, the ultimate can be activated. So that's the stacks right here, right? You can see it, again, showed it in the live stream over here, right? Where she gets enough stacks and then she will proc her ultimate like so. And oh wait, they don't show it yet. Come on, show the thing. Show the thing. Yeah, there we go. Domain expansion. And then she just, claps the enemy's cheeks. But yeah. So during the ultimate, it reduces the toughness types of regardless of weakness type, right? So she's all type, reduction. And then she also gets all type res down. And this only lasts for the duration of her ultimate, right? This, again, all type down doesn't really matter because she's lightning anyways. But just so you know, that's how the ultimate works, right? The ultimate applies a debuff, right? This is where the nihility aspect comes in, right? But again, she's really only nihility from lore. But again, the ultimate applies a debuff, during it, so it will always activate the 4-piece relic set, right? Of the new one that you should be using on her. So that's cool. You'll have guaranteed uptime on that. And then when any unit inflicts a debuff on the enemy target when using their ability, Acheron gains 1 point of slash stream and inflicts 1 crimson knot. Again, slash stream is her energy. Crimson knot is just a targeting mechanic for the ultimate. If debuffs are inflicted on multiple targets, then 1 stack of Crimson Knot will be inflicted on the enemy target with the most Crimson Knot stacks, right? This effect can only be triggered once per every ability usage. And again, this is one of the weird wording things for Hoyoverse, but basically what it's saying here is that per action, right? Per action that is done, you can get 1 stack of slash stream. So you can get 1 energy stack for this character, right? And apply 1 Crimson Knot, which is the targeting thing, for ultimate. The reason why this is important is because this means the faster the allied characters are, the more stacks you'll gain for ultimate, right? This is also important because if anyone does a attack that applies a debuff, like a follow-up attack, right? Or an ultimate attack, you'll gain a stack for her, right? And that's huge because any character in the future that has a bunch of attacks, or like Kafka, for example, who applies shock on her follow-up, right? As long as they are fast and activating it often, you'll get more and more stacks. So that's really good for actually building your stacks. Now, again, the wording issue here is how stacks are gained, right? And it's kind of complicated. There's a reason why there's a whole like Acheron document with a whole page going over her stacking mechanics. But the simplest way I can tell it to you is that everything works, but DOT triggers. And again, to sort of explain that, right, we're going to pull up the light cones real quickly. So everything will work except for DOT triggers. And what I mean by that, so Black Swan, her dot procking and then reapplying itself won't trigger it, but everything else will trigger it. So like Gwenhyphen using her ultimate to force proc her own DOT and giving fire kiss to the enemy works, but it procking itself won't work, is basically what I'm saying, right? Everything else does. And so this extends to light cone effects, right? So like Nihility light cones, like Silverwolf's light cone, Kafka's light cone, the Luca light cone, right? All of these will proc for her passive. And a very important one, Trend of Universal Market, that will proc for her passive, right? So keep that in mind. And again, I'll go into that further, but just so you know, that's how that works. Very important to know when using this character. When Acheron is in the battlefield, whenever the enemy target leaves or a unit is defeated, the Crimson Knot stacks will be transferred to the enemy target with the most Crimson Knot stacks on the battlefield. So again, if an enemy dies, right, the Crimson Knots will just move to the target with the most stacks. Very, very simple. Moving on, her skill. Her skill, it gives you a point and inflicts a Crimson Knot stat. And it is a blast skill. So main target and 2 adjacent targets. And then here's her ultimate. Delivers 3 Rain Blades and 1 Stygian Resurge in succession. Enemies cannot be inflicted with Crimson Knot while the ultimate is active, right? Because the whole point of the ult is to remove the stacks, right? You target with it and blah, blah, blah. So it deals lightning damage to a single enemy and removes 3 stacks of Crimson Knot from the target. When Crimson Knot is removed, deals lightning damage to all enemies with the additional damage multiplier the additional damage multipliers increase for every stack of Crimson Knot removed. The damage multiplier has a maximum limit, right? All that's really saying is that you have 3 single target attacks, and every time you do one, it removes 3 stacks of Crimson Knot that will do AoE damage, right? So the ultimate has a really high multiplier because of that. It's just gonna, again, explode and do a ton of damage. You can see it on screen, but there's a little red mark in the middle on the enemy that you're targeting, right? See? There's the proc, right? The Crimson Knot explosion. And so you just do that 3 single target attacks, and each time you do a single target attack, it's an explosion of Crimson Knots, right? And so that's basically how that works. It's not too complicated, it does damage, right? I just got it. And then Stygian Resurge is lightning damage to all enemies and removes the remaining Crimson Knot stacks, right? And you can't go over the 9 stacks, obviously, right? Because that wouldn't make any sense. And yeah, it will just explode and deal damage, right? That's about it. As shown here, splash, boom, everything dies, right? Very, very cool. So, in order to explain the light cone situation, so the light cone situation and why some people might have an issue with it is because of needing to have like these light cones, really. So if you, I double clicked on one, I bet. If you have any of these light cones, you already are a step ahead. So this Luca light cone is what you're going to want to use at least one of your supports, right? Preferably Pella, because it will allow her to apply debuff on basic, and stacking, and stacking defense down is very powerful. Silverwolf's light cone will also apply debuff, and this will allow other characters to, you know, get extra stacks. Kafka's light cone will also apply its own debuff. You can use this with like Black Swan E1 to force her E1 to get that lightning resistance down and do even more damage. So it's very powerful synergy there. And then there's Trend of Universal Market. So this is the reason why you'll see a bunch of guides and people talk about using preservation characters like Flame MC or Japard, as this will allow you to apply a debuff by getting hit, right? And actually, I think I might have skipped over that, but so actually let's run it back. So I did explain that any action here counts. So anything but DOT triggers, getting hit counts as well, right? So you can get hit and apply a debuff, and it will count. If the enemy acts and applies a debuff, it also counts, right? So keep that in mind, that there are ways to get extra stacks outside of your own character turn, right? Just the one DOT condition, it won't trigger. That's basically just a general rule. So yeah, again, not having these light cones will impact your team. So it is kind of unfortunate if anyone doesn't have Luca light cone, because it's, you know, not on banner. Her banner does have her, you know, best 4-star option at least. So if you don't have Good Night Sleep Well, you can dabble on the banner and hopefully get it, right? If not her own light cone. And obviously, Trinity Universal Market, I do wish it was on the banner. This is one of the best things for her overall, as it potentially could allow her, like I said in my previous video, get 6 stacks or even more just from like the Flame MC using 1 skill. So it's incredible for overall stat gain, and just incredible for any preservation character on her teams, right? Because again, it will allow you to get more stacks. So that's very powerful. And when you're actually looking out for this character, you need to look out for anyone who has debuffs, right? Now, you will obviously be running 2 Nihility, but if you're going, you know, above that and you don't need 2 Nihility, you might want to look out for characters that apply debuffs, right? That will help you gain your stacks. So yeah, hopefully that explains everything. Again, I might have skipped over it. The original one was recorded differently, but it's fine. I'm just going to move on to the light cone. So as for the light cone along the Passing Shore, it has very, very high stats in terms of base attack. In fact, it's equal to Dan's light cone in terms of stats. This is good and bad. It's good because she'll get a lot from attack percent, but it's bad because her HP and defense will be abysmally low, right? She's going to have sub 3k HP without any like extra HP, you know, buffing stats, and she'll have like sub 1k defense. So she'll be very powerful in terms of damage, but very squishy at the same time. So you're going to need to be careful. The light cone will buff your crit damage by 36% and apply empty bubbles, right? So this is a fixed chance, right? So you won't need effect hit rate at all. And it will apply on every attack that you do. So when the wearer hits the enemy target, it inflicts empty bubbles on the enemy, lasting for 1 turn. And unlike these other light cones, it doesn't say if they're not already, so it's not turn restricted either, which means you'll get this guaranteed proc every time, right? This effect can be triggered 1 time against each target every time the wearer launches an attack. And then wares deal 24% more damage to targets with empty bubbles, and the damage from the ware's ultimate is additionally increased by 24%. And obviously you could use this on any Nihility character, but this is just a very powerful effect in general, and it synergizes well with her kit, right? Because it allows her skill to actually get 2 stacks per turn, right? Normally you would just gain 1, right, from the skill itself, because she doesn't get a debuff, right? However, the light cone counts as a debuff, right? And so it will allow you to gain stacks here by, getting it. So you'll get 2 stacks per rotation instead of just 1. And oh my god, this one's lasting longer than the previous video. I apologize. I'm just trying to make sure everything's clear and that you guys understand how this character functions. Because again, I've already talked about all these light cones working. I've already talked about her light cone being very good on her. It's not necessary. It will be a team building issue. Players who don't have these, like at least pearls or like trend will suffer, unfortunately, right? And so they might, have that as negative against the character, but she's still very strong. Another light cone to talk about is tutorial. Put this on any Nihility supports for them to get their ultimate faster and more stacks, in the rotation. So again, 1.0 players who haven't played the game in 1.1 are also missing out on this as well. So again, another like new character block, but I don't think it's an issue, to be honest with you. It's just you're gonna have to roll better, I guess. I don't know. It's hard to say. I don't really think the light cone thing is too much of an issue, but of course that will be player to player, right? Is there anything else I missed? I don't think so, but in case y'all are very confused about DOT, let me show you how debuffs work in this game, right? So I'm going to start the battle with Gwynifen skill. Okay, start the battle with Gwynifen skill. As you can see, right, this red down arrow indicates that it counts as a debuff, right, and not a mark, right? Marks will be like, what is it? Oh my god, I'm forgetting. Hinia's burden stacks, right? Those don't count as a debuff, but everything else does. Right, so I'm going to throw this just so you can see that now I've got multiple debuffs. That would only give Acheron 1 stack, for example, right? And then we're just going to attack with Pella, right? We didn't get the proc. Now, MC. My MC is currently running the Trinity Universal Market, right? And here's why the synergy is very good. Because I can do this, right? So taunting will then apply the taunt debuff to every single enemy, right? Now, if the enemy acts, it's a 1-turn taunt, right? So it will go away. But this will now force everyone to attack the MC, and them attacking the MC gives, us a debuff, right? Burned, right? It's going to hit this burned, right? And then burn again, right? And then this guy's going to attack the MC and then, oh, burned, right? So I've now just gained like 6 stacks from the MC without doing anything on any other character. So very, very powerful synergy. And again, there will be further videos on how to run these characters. But just to give you an example of how it would work, right? That's basically how the MC works with Acheron. In terms of the stat gain, right? So, yeah. I believe I've covered everything. Hopefully this helps explain how she works. I know it's a lot. It's a 30-minute video. It's crazy. Longer than the last one. But if you have any questions, please feel free to ask me down below. I'm not sure what more I could explain, to be honest with you. I think that's everything. Oh god, this video is longer than the last one, dude. Jesus Christ. But yeah, like, subscribe if you want to know more about the game, or if you want to, all that stuff. Again, go to my Twitch, right? I'll see you guys in the next one.